Have you ever noticed how some people spend money like it's nothing? Your friend casually buys a $15 lunch between classes like it's no big deal. Another one suddenly books a trip to Spain next week. Someone else is going out every single weekend, ordering drinks, taking Ubers, and meanwhile you're sitting there thinking, how are they affording all this? Because from your perspective, every single one of those purchases feels like a big decision. I mean, when you walk into a grocery store, you immediately check the prices. You think before buying new clothes. You wait for sales. You try to save money whenever you can. And sometimes it genuinely starts to feel like you're behind in life. Like everyone else got access to money you somehow missed out on. Especially when you're young. When you're in your late teens or early 20s, money becomes emotional. Because it's not just about buying candy and gaming consoles anymore. Instead, money becomes tied to your identity, your freedom, and your social life. Because the more money you spend on things, the more interesting you become to others. And sometimes you can feel like the people around you are just living more than you. Like they're experiencing life while you're stuck calculating whether spending money on takeout is worth it or not. But here's something I think a lot of people need to hear. Many people who are spending money like this are often not in a better financial situation than you are. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way, I just mean that people normalize different lifestyles. That's all. Because if someone grows up in an environment where eating out all the time is the normal, then that becomes their baseline for the rest of their lives. If someone's family traveled every summer growing up, then traveling doesn't feel luxurious to them. It feels necessary, it's expected, it's the normal. And this is something I didn't understand for a long time. I used to think some people were just magically better with money, or that everyone around me secretly had more income than me. But over time, you realize a lot of people are spending money that you wouldn't have felt comfortable spending in their situation. Not because they're irresponsible and not because you're cheap, but because they genuinely feel like those things are a part of a normal life. To them, buying lunch every day doesn't feel special. To you, it feels luxurious and expensive. And that difference matters. Because your relationship with money gets built slowly over years. Some people are terrified with spending money, and some people are terrified of not appearing successful. And both of those mindsets affects your spending behaviors. There are people making good money who constantly feels broke. And there are people making average money who feel financially calm. And that's why comparing lifestyles is just dangerous. Because you're comparing visible spending without seeing the invisible stress behind it. You don't see the credit card debt, the anxiety, the financial help from parents, the paycheck-to-paycheck living, the impulsive spending, the regret after the purchases. You only see the Instagram story, the cafe, the trip, the outfit, the concert. Social media has made these feelings so much worse. Because now you're not just comparing yourself with your friends anymore, you're comparing yourself to thousands of people. You open your phone and see someone's moving into a new apartment, someone's buying a new car, someone's traveling, someone's partying, and after a while, your brain starts believing everyone else is financially ahead of me. But that's usually not true. You're just seeing everyone's highlights mixed together. And when you're young especially, people spend money emotionally, not logically. People spend money because they want to fit in, they want experiences, and they want comfort, status, and quick relief of stress. And most importantly, they don't want to feel left out, which is completely human. But what's so dangerous is when you start feeling ashamed for being financially careful. Because honestly, being careful with money at a young age is probably one of the least appreciated advantages you can have. People can be horrible. You might feel pressure to spend money just to not get left behind. But that's when you need to ask yourself, is this what I really want? Are these the people I actually want to be around? Because there is a difference between people who spend money recklessly on themselves and people who pressure everyone around them to spend recklessly too. And those two types affect you in completely different ways. Your friend who buys lunch for themselves every day, that's not hurting anyone, but it can make you feel insecure, of course, because you start to wonder, how are they able to afford that so casually? But then there's the other person, the one who don't want to buy lunch alone, they need everyone else to come with them too. And honestly, that's where it becomes a problem. Because now it's not really about enjoying the food anymore, it's about social pressure. I actually had a friend like that once. Eventually, I just stopped staying near school during lunch breaks because I knew I'd end up spending money I wasn't comfortable spending. And maybe some people will hear that and think, come on, just enjoy life a little. But I think there's a difference between enjoying your life and spending money every single day just because you're scared of feeling left out. To me, real freedom is being able to spend money without feeling stressed afterwards. Not forcing yourself to spend money you can't comfortably afford just to fit in. So if you're young and you're already thinking about these things honestly, you're probably in a better place than you realize. Your friends aren't necessarily spending more money because they have more money. A lot of the time, they just have a completely different relationship with money than you do. And I mean, this stuff is hard in today's world, especially online, where everyone is obsessed with living your life. Because now, every experience feels like something you're supposed to buy. But learning how to delay gratification is insanely valuable. Being able to say, no, I don't actually need that, that's a real skill. And weirdly enough, it becomes more rare today. Because a lot of people today are constantly spending money to avoid discomfort. Boredom, stress, loneliness, feeling left out. So if you are someone who can pause for a second and think carefully before spending, I mean, that's not a weakness, that's self-control. And I know it feels so weird watching everyone else go spend money daily on food, clothes, drinks and so on. And how are they doing it without even seeming a little bothered? Well, what's so counterintuitive is that the people who feel the poorest in a group of friends are often the people most aware of the value of money. Because when you understand how long it takes to earn money, and especially save money, you naturally become more intentional with it. You can't casually spend $20 because your brain immediately translates it into hours worked or days of saving. Meanwhile, some people just disconnect spending from earning completely. Again, not because they're bad people, it's just a different relationship with money. But here's an important point. Some people genuinely enjoy spending more. Some people love cafes, some people love traveling constantly, some people value experiences more than savings. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes financial advice online becomes way too extreme. I feel like there's sometimes a bit of shaming people for spending their own money. People act like buying takeaway coffee is ruining your future. Or like spending money on entertainment automatically means you're irresponsible. That's not true. Money is supposed to improve your life. The goal isn't to become obsessed with saving every cent, because for most of us, that would just make us miserable. The goal is to build a life where money stops controlling your emotions, and that balance, well, looks different for everyone. Some people don't feel bad when they buy lunch every day, and if that's the case, then in my opinion, they're already at their goal, even if they don't have mountains of savings in their bank accounts. But for a lot of people, to be able to have that emotional detachment from spending money, we need a bit of a buffer to be comfortable. Maybe we first want that home or car or that investing portfolio before we start spending. And that's also fine. But you need to know your needs, and because everyone's needs are different, you can't just give a general financial advice. Because at the end of the day, we're just supposed to feel happy and content, right? But there is always a risk that later in life, you wish that maybe you would have saved a bit more on the side instead of spending it all on food and entertainment. But that's just my speculations. So if you're someone who constantly feels behind because you're careful with money, I really want you to stop seeing that as a weakness. Because it probably means you understand something important very early in life. You understand that money is limited. You understand that lifestyle inflation is real. You understand that constantly spending money does not automatically equal happiness. And sometimes, a lot of people don't realize that until much later. Because the risk of not being aware of your spendings when you're young is that when you're in your 30s making good salaries, you still feel trapped financially because your lifestyle expanded with every paycheck. Bigger apartment, more subscriptions, more eating out, more shopping, more everything. And eventually, you're making way more money than before, but somehow still stress and complain about how expensive everything is and how hard it is to make your life go around. That's why looking rich and being financially secure are two completely different things. Financial security is quiet and doesn't always depend on income. Sometimes financial security looks like this: cooking at home, saving money, buying things on sale, thinking carefully before purchases, saying no sometimes, which isn't very glamorous, but what if it makes you feel good? And one of the biggest scams of modern life is how normalized overspending has become. Your friend that buys lunch every single day, they still don't feel like they're living luxurious enough because there will always be someone who has it better to compare it with. We see influencers on big trips, wear expensive clothes, eating at fancy restaurants day after day, and suddenly people feel like they also need to do that, otherwise they aren't good enough or they will look poor. But please remember that influencers, they're getting paid to do those things. I mean, influencers aren't normal people living their day-to-day life. They are working with marketing, and those who are good at it, they are able to live a really glamorous life. But it becomes a problem when that influencer makes it look like this is just a normal life, because it makes people stressed and feel like their life isn't good enough. And this has honestly changed our society. People spend money constantly now, and not because they are happy, not because they are financially secure, but because spending has become the solution to everything. You're bored? Buy something. You're sad? Order food. You're stressed? Maybe some online shopping. You feel lonely? Go out and spend money. Everything becomes consumption, and honestly, I've seen how these expectations around spending can really turn into actual social pressure. I've seen people get excluded from friends groups just for questioning the cost of things. Like asking, do we really need that expensive hotel? Do we really need to rent a car for that? Couldn't we do something cheaper instead? And somehow, just bringing that up makes people look boring. Because just talking about money has almost become socially uncomfortable. It's like, of course we should spend a lot of our money, there's no question. And with those expectations, it's not a surprise it's hard to say no. And of course it will lead to a lot of stress for some of us. People say things like, bro, it's only $50. And well, that's easy to say when you're not the one that's stressing about money afterwards. And I think a lot of people forget that not everyone experiences money the same way emotionally. For some people, spending $50 casually feels completely normal. For someone else, they see it as they just lost an entire week of savings. So if you're someone who naturally questions these habits, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's awareness. And honestly, I think society should value that more than it currently does. Because the internet makes it feel like if you're not constantly traveling, partying and upgrading your life, then somehow you're wasting your 20s. But honestly, spending money like that isn't what makes everyone happy. And I think that a lot of people are just doing it because everyone else is doing it. A huge part of your 20s is just figuring things out. Financially, emotionally, socially. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Some people are just a little better at looking confident while doing it. And I promise you, there are people you envy right now who are secretly stressed every single night about money. There are people posting vacation photos while worrying about their bank accounts. There are people trying to maintain lifestyles they can barely sustain. And there are also genuinely wealthy people who are still financially insecure. Because insecurity is just psychological, not mathematical. That's why the comparison never ends. There will always be someone spending more than you, always. So if your entire self-worth becomes attached to matching other people's lifestyles, you will never feel financially secure. And maybe that's the real point of the video. Not that saving money makes you superior in any way, and not that spending money is bad, but that being intentional with money. That's it. That's the secret. And if you're young and already thinking careful about money, you're probably doing a lot better than you think, even if it doesn't feel like it right now, because real wealth is not looking rich for strangers. Real wealth is feeling calm, feeling stable, feeling like your life isn't controlled by your bank account. And that takes time to build. So no, you're probably not behind your friends, you're just more aware. And one day, that awareness might become one of the most valuable things you have. But there is still one thing we need to answer. What if the people constantly spending money are actually happier? What if they're doing life the right way? The people always buying takeaway coffee, always eating out, traveling more, buying new clothes, going to concerts. I mean, honestly, being able to spend money on things that make you happy sounds really great on paper. But before you jump to that conclusion, we need to think a bit more careful. Because our human body is incredibly good at adapting, not just physically, like how our muscles grow when we train them a lot, but psychologically too. It's a natural survival mechanism. Your brain is constantly adjusting to whatever habits you have in your life. And after a while, your life stops feeling special and becomes normal. Someone who buys lunch every single day barely feels excitement from it anymore. It just becomes routine. So maybe from this angle, they aren't happier. But the interesting part is, what if they suddenly had to stop? Yeah, they'd probably feel noticeably less happy. At least at first, because then our brain adapts. Eventually, meal prepping becomes normal too, and the same thing happens with almost everything in life. Money, comfort, luxury, lifestyle, we get used to things surprisingly fast. And I find that so fascinating, because when you become aware of these things, it's like unlocking a superpower. Because it raises this weird question: who is actually happier in the end? The person with all these luxurious habits, or the person who learned how to feel satisfied with less? Or maybe, after enough time, we will return to roughly the same emotional baseline anyway, so nothing matters. But there is one catch, because even though the brain eventually adapts to almost any lifestyle, it's usually much harder to adapt downward than upwards. It's harder to go from buying coffee every day to suddenly start making it at home. It's harder to go from constantly eating out to meal prepping every week. Not because your body can't adapt, eventually it will, but because once you've experienced a certain level of comfort or convenience, your brain remembers that. And that's what makes lifestyle inflation so dangerous. Which basically means that with increasing income, you also increase your expenses. Like if you get a better salary, you might buy a nicer car or go out eating more often. So you end up with pretty much the same amount of money at the end of the month anyways. But why do we do this? Well, because upgrading your life feels instantly rewarding. You buy better food, more conveniences, more subscriptions, and at first, it's super exciting. But when your brain adapts and that new lifestyle quietly becomes your new normal, you stop feeling the happiness from having it. But the danger is that you will still feel the pain of losing it. And that's why so many people hold on to habits that might look expensive or wasteful from the outside. Because psychologically, moving downwards feels so much worse. And once you understand that, you start realizing how powerful lifestyle inflation really is. It's actually surprisingly similar to how addictions work. The body really behaves in the same way. At first, trying that thing felt amazing. Your brain lights up, it's rewarding, special. But as you keep going, the body adapts. And now it's just your new normal. So to get that amazing feeling, you need to either up the dosage or up the frequency. And if you lower the dosage, you will feel like shit. And now you're addicted. And it's the exact same behavior with lifestyles. But I don't think people realize how common this really is. The expensive coffee, the food deliveries, the subscriptions, the constant convenience. At first, those things feel exciting, then they quietly become expectations. And eventually, not having them starts feeling worse than having them ever felt good. But maybe you could argue that people living more luxurious lives actually are happier. Because status matters. And honestly, I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, that makes complete sense. For thousands of years, being respected by other people around you really improved your chances of survival. Being valued by the group mattered. Status mattered. So naturally, human beings become deeply sensitive to comparison. We want to feel attractive. We want to look successful. We want others to admire us. And a lot of modern spending is still driven by that same instinct. The nicer clothes, the expensive restaurants, the cars, the apartments, the vacations. Part of it is enjoyment, sure, but another part of it is to send signals. We want to feel like we're doing well compared to the people around us. And intuitively, that sounds like it should make people happier. But there's a catch here as well. Comparison is a game you can never win, because no matter how luxurious your life becomes, there will always be someone living better than you. Someone richer, someone more attractive, more successful, more impressive. And in today's world, social media makes this infinitely worse. Because now you're not comparing yourself to just your group of friends. You're comparing yourself to millions of people online. So even if your lifestyle would have looked incredible 20 years ago, your brain can still make you feel behind today. And at the same time, there will always be people living worse than you too, which creates this weird contradiction. Because if comparison would create happiness, then almost everyone should feel successful compared to someone out there. But I mean, clearly, that's not how human works. And I think that reveals something very important. Happiness is relative, but so is insecurity. The comparison will never end. Of course, there are limits to this. I mean, having access to food, safety, clean water, stability, those things absolutely matter for your happiness. But once basic needs are met, it becomes surprisingly difficult for human beings to feel permanently satisfied. Because the brain adapts, it normalizes things, and then immediately starts looking upward again. And maybe that's why it's so hard to feel content in modern life. Because comparison itself shouldn't be the problem. Competition can actually make life feel meaningful. A lot of people actually enjoy striving toward things. Winning, improving, competing, building a better life. The problem is when comparison stops motivating you and starts triggering disruptive emotions. So maybe the real question isn't, why are people spending so much money? Maybe the real question is, what happens when an entire society keeps adapting to higher and higher standards of living? When does it stop? What happens with the people who are already struggling financially when all the prices just keep rising? I really hope this sparks some questions for you. I look forward to reading your discussions in the comments. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to go a bit more easy on yourself.